Hello and welcome to the Rock and Roll to Success. Today I have my friend Judson Yant. This boy is a beast. He's gone to Europe and back. He's lived in Prague for many years and he has so many interesting stories to tell us. Hey Judd, how are you doing, man?
Doing good, man. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing awesome. So I wrote the other I read the other day something that you wrote about when you were in high school, you used to have two jobs because you had this dream of going to Europe and you wanted to live there. And where did you get this idea from?
So basically, growing up, it kind of goes into play a little bit with like how I was raised. I grew up in like a Christian home and everything, and I honestly, I never found like a lot of joy through all my childhood. So I kind of had this dream to leave and move somewhere and kind of like figure life out on my own. And I thought that the best way to do that would just be to move to Europe because I always wanted to go to Europe and I loved art and architecture. So I decided that Europe was the place to go. So yeah, whenever I was in high school, I got two jobs. I was working in a bakery at some grocery store, and then I was also working in early mornings before school as a valet at some hospital. So I was doing that before school from like 3 a.m. up until like 9 a.m. And then I'd go to school for like the 6 or 7 hours or whatever, and then after that I would go and work at the bakery until like 9:30 or 10 at night, and then that was my life like consistently. That lasted for probably like I would say close to a year or something, and I was just saving up all of that money to actually move to Europe. And then when I turned 18 and got out of high school, pretty quickly after that, I went to a community college for about like a month and a half to do psych or physical therapy, and I was like, yeah, I just want to leave and move away. So I ended up moving to Europe at 18.
Wow, that's a badass story, man. And did you go directly to Prague or did you travel around a bit first?
So
How was it?
originally I was going to move somewhere in Germany. So whenever I moved originally, I was in Munich for about a week and a half to 2 weeks, just kind of like figuring things out because I didn't really have any plan. I moved with no plan. I was just like, I'm gonna figure it out. And then I took a trip to Prague. I didn't even know, like, I honestly had never even heard of Prague at that point. I didn't know what it was. And I took a trip over there, and it was such a magical city that I was like, I'm gonna change all of my plans and just move to Czech Republic. So it was like 2 weeks in Germany, and then I moved to Prague. But I have done a lot of traveling in terms of just going places in Europe.
Yeah, and since you like architecture, Prague is a magical
Beautiful.
city.
Yeah. It's
It's
a one
like
big masterpiece.
it is. It's like a Middle Ages Disneyland of sorts, and you
Yeah.
see people playing classical music in the middle of the street. It's
I
quite a
know.
magical place.
It's like more of a classy New York in terms of the fact of people like being on the street and just like playing music or just doing their thing. I don't know, it's pretty refreshing.
And when you got there, how did you figure things out? Like, how did you find out something to do and work?
Yeah, so uh originally I moved there and I'm a pretty social person. And I was finding myself like I kind of like met people right off the bat just from like going out and talking to people and stuff. And I made some friends pretty much immediately who were Czech. And yes, from there I I applied for a college, and it didn't end up working out the first time that I applied to a college. So I was just working around. I started working at this bar slash like club, and just to like pay the bills and stuff like that, and just keep my standard of living up. And I had a little bit of like, I don't know if I feel like I can say it, but I played the system a lot when it came to like getting my visa. Like I'd always be far enough along in my process to like be able to get it, let it slide, without actually being there like fully legally and stuff like that. And then it lasted like that for a couple of years, and then I ended up reapplying, or not reapplying, applying to a different college, just because I wanted to do something. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I applied to a college for psychology, and whenever I applied for them, I got in and all of that, but it was a pretty expensive college, and I kind of was already like out of the money that I had saved up at that point because it was a couple of years later. I was kind of just living more like paycheck to paycheck almost, and um, yeah, so I got into the school for psychology, but there were some legal documents that they said were not like official looking enough that I got sent over from the States. So it kind of screwed my plans up for getting a better job that could actually pay for that school. So yeah, so I ended up dropping out for the second time at like 3 months in after the kind of the first semester. And then yeah, and then I just kept working at I kind of got that's where my life started to like fall off a little bit is when that happened, and I was in debt, and I didn't really have like a way to make good money, like good enough money to pay off my debt and still keep my standard of living up. So that's uh that's kind of the story about how I made it over there.
And about that time that things sort of started crumbling apart, or at least that's the feeling you got at the time. How was it for you? How did you get past that?
Uh the Getting past it is kind of like putting it nicer than it actually went. Like that was like the beginning of me reaching like my rock bottom of my entire life, which was coming up on a year ago. Coming up on a year ago, and yeah, so I don't know. There were a lot of emotions, and I say that there were a lot of emotions, but at that point, I was like I had said, and I've posted about it before. I was pretty deep into like drugs and alcohol and partying and stuff all the time. And with my personality type, I'm not a stressed out person naturally. And also, it goes into like some of the emotion stuff that I talk about too. I found ways to kind of regulate all of my emotions. So throughout that time period, I knew that my life was starting to like take a turn for the worst, but I didn't have it like at the top of my mind, like this is something I have to fix. It was more something that I had a mindset where it was like everything's going to end up being just fine. Like it'll all work out in the end, etc. And yeah, so initiative was something that I didn't really take when it came to my problems that I started facing at that point.
And it has worked out in the end, hasn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
So,
That's what I always think about too. Is like if you push the things may not always work out immediately, and they may not work out exactly how you see them working out. But if you look far enough into the future, things end up being fine. Usually.
yeah, usually when we're in the eye of the storm, we tend to think that the situation is much more difficult or much more
Yeah,
dire than we think. But in
yeah,
the end, things work out one way or another,
yeah.
like you said.
100%.
And what did you learn from not only from that situation specifically, but overall living abroad and fending for yourself, trying to find work and traveling also? What do you think were the main things that you learned and that made you grow in that period?
I would say probably me compared to most people, because there are people of all ages, and you always hear them talk about like scared of uncertainty and scared of change. And I think that being 18 years old and putting myself on the line so much to where I dropped everything I ever knew and just moved to a new culture, a new place that I'd never been, didn't know anybody. Um, I think that that played a super big role in my way of thinking. Um, when it comes to the fact that change is kind of inevitable, you'll always face change, and the way to get through change is kind of to just embrace it and take it on. And I think one thing I learned is like not only just face your challenges, but like chase after your challenges. It's like when things don't seem certain and you don't really know what's going to happen next. That's like your opportunity to just like step up and do something. And some of like the advice that I would like share now, looking back on things I learned, weren't things that I learned in the moment when they were happening. Like looking back on that situation, it's like I can talk about all of these things that I learned looking back on that situation. But when I was going through that, all of the last like 4 years, it's not advice that I was actually taking, but I think that that's what led me to having more experience on the matter looking back. I think another thing that I found a lot because whenever I moved to Europe, I had said at the beginning, I'd mentioned that I was not really like happy or joyful in my life, and just wanted a big change and just kind of reinvent myself. And I think that in that I started to, and there's a lot of stories that tie into all of that when it came to like emotional battles and stuff that I faced, just trying to find myself. But I think that I learned a lot about being true to who you are. And once you find who you are and search for that person, when you find it, don't let it go. Because I think that people end up getting a little too stuck in their environment and stuck in their ways of thinking and kind of like identities that they take on, and just kind of always be adaptable and ready to shift that identity as it's needed.
Yeah, I was thinking of something while you were talking about this, of being true to who you are, and sometimes when we never break out of our shell, we never go away from the place we were born in, or we never take some time to travel or to see the world from different perspectives, we might end up too trapped in the culture we were brought up in and sort of not finding ourselves. Like, how can you be true to who you are if you don't know what options are there?
Yeah, and there's so many options out there. That's why I think that it's very important in life, no matter like where you come from, to always figure out like why you believe things that you believe, why you have certain opinions, and then kind of like reverse engineer back in your life to where you may have like got that, whether that be a parent or whether that be like a teacher or just a situation that happened prior in your life, um, trauma or not trauma, but just in general, like you have to, I don't know. I think that people just get trapped, like you said, in their environment. And the faster that you can get comfortable with not being stuck in that environment and actually going and like figuring out how other people think and like learning new cultures and stuff like that, you're better off and you'll mature a whole lot faster. And I think that maybe not wisdom, but you will learn understanding a little bit better. At least that's how it worked for me.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the more different experiences you have, the quicker you'll start acquiring this life experience that can be translated into wisdom if you take the lessons that you're given by life.
Yeah.
And if on the other hand, if you're living the same day over and over again, it's like the guy that's on the same job for 10 years, not
Yeah.
necessarily he has that much experience. He's just living the same year 10 times.
Yeah. I think that that's honestly like if I was ever fearful of anything, it would be the fear of ever living a life like that, where it's just a repetitive day every single day. That's something that ended up happening to me like big time, while with my time over there, with just kind of like repeating my day. My schedule was always the same and not leading me in any direction. And I didn't know myself well enough. I knew myself well, but I didn't know myself well enough, and I didn't have enough clarity with myself and what I was doing to actually ever have a vision or work towards something. And I was not stressed. Stress isn't the word, but I was always trying to figure out like how I was going to stay. And my whole purpose with that is like I feel like when I was in America, I was unhappy and I associated it with like my childhood unhappiness. And then I moved to Europe, and that's where I like started to find myself and like broke out of my shell and reinvented myself. So coming back to the States was always something that worried me, just because I felt like if I went back to the States, I'd lose who I was. But it was kind of a false scenario that I made up in my head because it wasn't the place that made me who I am. And on top of that, I was kind of lost in addictions and stuff like that. So I was kind of blinding myself to how that actual situation was. And then last summer, whenever I called my dad and told him I needed him to help me buy a plane ticket back to the States so I could like turn my life around and figure out, just change my whole trajectory, figure something out. That's where that really like shone through, and I realized that yeah, I do want to be back in Europe, but I I need this time to just kind of be alone because I've met thousands and thousands of people over the last few years working at bars and stuff, and just like socializing, and all of that was fun, and I don't regret any of the experiences that I had. But at the same time, you kind of have to have a time period where you kind of flip a switch in your mind and you realize that like, why am I here? Or like, what is my purpose? And I needed to leave in order to do that. I needed to be alone and have a break.
Yeah, and to your credit, you did it pretty early, really, because there are many people that wait till they're 30, 35 to start thinking about this, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's too late by then, but you did it
Yeah.
at a good time.
Yeah, I made a post about this. I wrote a post about this not too long ago, and it had something to do with the fact that you don't have to wait. Thinking in decades when it comes to like how you transition your life is like it's smart in some ways depending on the vision, but I think it's stupid because you society tells you a lot of the times to relax and party while you're young, and then in your 30s get serious about your life. And while I think that 30 and 40 and 50 can still even be young, um, I think that the faster that you can do it, you put yourself ahead. And it's funny because I had some comments on that post and they were talking, uh, they had mentioned like, oh, this is stupid advice. Like, uh, I'm 29 or I'm 30 and I still party here and there. It's all in the balance. And I was like, I'm not talking shit to you because of like partying when you're older and all of that, but you're also on X and you're starting businesses and like it's fine if you go out every weekend or so. But I was like, from my experience, it was like 4 years of my life. It was an every day and every night thing. And I got out of all of that when before I turned 23, when I was like 22 and a half. So I was like, I'm just thankful that I was able to experience that and honestly experience more of it than most people probably will in a lifetime, even who party often, and just get that out of my system. And I think that the experiences and the mental changes and stuff that I also had throughout those time periods kind of set me up for success now, or success if I keep my mind clear on my goals, because of the fact that I've been able to experience that. And even with writing too, like meeting so many people and in the party scene, you learn a lot like subconsciously. If you're conscious of it and aware of it, you actually do. But like there's a lot of psychology and stuff that goes behind like talking to people all the time or like kind of investing in like I was always an observant child too. Like all growing up, I've always been observant. So all of that, like kind of all of my life experiences up to this point has led me to actually be good at this and become successful. I just needed a channel.
So you think that those experiences on the nightlife and working on the nightlife made you better at pattern recognition when it comes to people or what people are
Yeah.
thinking or feeling?
Yeah. Just because when I was growing up, like I asked my mom this not too long ago because Jack Moses, he had mentioned in one of his like courses or something or posts to like a good way to find what you should be doing now is to go and like talk to a childhood friend or your mom or something and ask what you like to do as a child. And my mom told me that one of the things that stood out about me the most was I was always just seemed to be in my own little world. And it wasn't like I was just lost in my own little world, but I had like a bubble around me and I was always like trying to identify um what people were thinking and I was always trying to read the room for like as little as she can remember me. And that was something that I transitioned or I kept going forever, like even up till now. But growing up, I was sensitive. So if I treated you well and I didn't feel like it was being reciprocated, then I would like have bitterness towards that situation. And it was like that kind of childhood, like that kind of mentality the whole way through. So I learned to be very good at observing people. And then just with like party life and stuff too, like you're trying to pull girls, you're trying to have fun, you're trying to make people like fuck with you. So it's like you start already having that personality all growing up and that kind of mentality. Yeah, I think that a lot of the experiences that I had in the nightlife scene and all of that played a big role in me observing and understanding people and pattern recognition because people are all full of patterns. They're different, but they're always the same, and it's easy to read.
Yeah, they are. And there are so many interesting books about human nature and human psychology. And I'm sure you've read most of them already because you like the subject. And how has this helped you with your writing, with your creative process?
I'm still honestly learning how it all connects with my writing process and everything, my creative process. But I feel like the more that I learn and the more that I actually practice writing, the more that I feel like I can hit on people's pain points. And I think that that has a lot to do with the fact that I've always, if there's a character trait about me, it's like I'm usually always at 100. I'm like I'm either at 0 or I'm at 100. Like I'm wild or I'm the most chill person in the room and just vibing doing my own thing. And throughout all my experiences, I learned a lot about just emotions and like how people think and like what triggers people and like what words can be used that like make you tick and like doing that individually. And I'm still trying to figure out how to do that as like a whole, like kind of like the tribal psychology of it when it comes to writing content and like reaching a specific group and target people. Because I'm pretty good at it when it comes to individuals, but I'm still trying to figure out how to use that in my writing. But I think when I find it, it's going to be something that will be very useful for me.
Yeah, one thing the big guys that talk about copywriting and that kind of thing do is that they kind of make up a character on their mind in their mind. So they think, so this is Judson, he's like 23, 24 years old, he likes this and that. And so they make the persona in their mind and then they write for that person. And
Yeah,
then you
Avatar.
reach, yeah, the avatar, yeah. And then you end up reaching people that are similar to that avatar. So maybe
I think
that's,
I think that that's played a, at least a little bit of a part in my writing because the more that I've actually found my voice through posting content and all of that, I've realized that a lot of my content that does better is just almost writing to myself. Like it's almost like a journal entry of something that just happened to me or a life experience. And sometimes those hit the hardest because I feel like the timeline on Twitter is so filled with like little guru advice or just something that's kind of artificial. And I feel like the more that you can tap into your own thoughts and your own ideas and your own personal stories, the more it actually can relate to people because people are so used to seeing that my top 5 copywriting tips are like how to close a call or something like that. But then when you come in with like, yeah, I had this problem and this is how I solved the problem, and it's all just written well, it touches people a little bit differently because it's like something most of the time everybody has gone through a similar situation as you have or a little bit of the same experience if they're not honestly going through it right now. So I feel like the more that you can direct things that have impacted you in your writing when you post, the more that you'll actually reach people because deep down I feel like the more internal you can like develop your mind, the more you'll reach people internally because while everyone's looking for the external things, you're kind of most people miss the fact that that's not what life is about. So I think that that plays a big part in writing.
yeah, I feel that too. I feel that when you're most vulnerable, when you talk about your real pain points, not the ones that we sort of make up, like those bullshit things that everyone sort of has lived through, but for instance, when you talk about the drug and alcohol problems you had, I think this shows so much courage because not everyone can be so open and talk about the times in which they were at their lowest. And when you do something like that, people feel like you're much more relatable or like they can trust you.
Yeah. I think I don't know. I don't like wearing a mask. I know everybody acts in a certain way. And like I said, even when it comes to observing people and like being knowing how to act, and like the psychology between like getting people on the same wave as you or like figuring out kind of empath. Um, I don't know. I just always like to be an open person, and if there's like one value that I've always had, it's like honesty. Honestly. Um, I I don't like putting on a front for people. So, and I don't have any shame in things that I've done or honestly like I think that a lot of people, when it comes to like if you've had a drug addiction or you've been an alcoholic or you've been at your rock bottom, people tend to feel ashamed about those things and people tend to think less of themselves for those things. And I feel like I've developed my mindset into a way where I appreciate all of those things and I'm grateful that all of those things happened. And I think that that's what helps me in the long run with actually writing about it and just sharing it. Plus, I know that I want to help people. And I know that if I've gone through it and I've gone through it at a super deep level, an intense level, that if the more open I am about it, the more, like you said, people will trust me and people can actually relate and I can actually like help somebody. I can help somebody if they need advice or just read my post and be like, damn, like maybe I could be a little bit more open about what I have going on, you know, just to the smallest degrees. I don't even need to know about it. Just, I think if I talk about it, it will help people.
Yeah, definitely. And even if they don't have the same problem, they might have a similar problem, or their brother, their friend might be having a similar problem, and they might send your posts their way, and this can help someone. And you
Yeah.
probably won't ever know about this, but just by putting it out there, it might be helping other people, and that's awesome.
Yeah, I think that that plays a role in all content too. Like people get lost in the vanity metrics and like chasing likes and like, oh, this post didn't get as many impressions. But one thing I've realized even with friends and their businesses and stuff is like sometimes it's always the people, sometimes it's the posts that don't do well and you don't get a lot of likes that end up getting you a client or end up getting you an inbound lead just because it's like there's always somebody watching and there's always somebody that can appreciate something that maybe the 99% of the other population don't appreciate because that's kind of the beauty of people is like everyone is the same but a little bit different and that's what kind of makes them related to you in certain topics.
Yeah, and that's interesting because sometimes the when you post a platitude, you'll get 1,000 likes, 500 comments. But sometimes when you post that deep post that you thought about for a week, you will get like 5 comments from your friends only and a
Yeah,
couple likes. And but yeah, like you said, sometimes the people that need it most, they won't be even brave enough to comment, but they might come and send you a DM and say, "Thank you,
yeah,
man."
or
So,
not, you know,
or not,
like
or
yeah,
not, but in the
like you said,
future, maybe.
yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah, man. And do you want to share some of your crazy stories while you were living and traveling in Europe? Or
I don't know what you want the podcast to be about because, like, honestly, my life was so taken over by drugs and stuff at that point. Like, all of my stories end up being somewhere involved with like drugs or alcohol.
dude, really, we can take it wherever you want to. I'm here.
Okay,
We're an open book. We're here to help people find their way to success. So it's good to know stories from rock bottom. It's good to know inspiring stories of coming
yeah,
back.
yeah, okay. I'll tell you a little bit about that story then, kind of like the rock bottom, since I touched on it earlier. Um, it was like last, or I guess it was December of 2022. November, December of 2022 is when I ended up dropping out of that school. And that's when like life started to kind of fall apart. At the time, I was living with my girlfriend and her family, and I had no money coming in. I was in debt. I hadn't like paid them any rent or anything up to that point. I was like, I was just struggling. And the problem with that is, like I had mentioned earlier, I didn't really feel like a strong need to actually figure things out. It was lack of initiative completely. It was like watching my world burn around me, and I was just watching it happen and thinking like, oh, the fire will be put out eventually. Like, fuck it. And I wasn't only like disrupting my life though. It's like I was disrupting my girlfriend's life. I was disrupting her family's life. All of that, and the the worst part about it though is like I was just always like partying and I was always like away and my girlfriend and me were like at a rough point in our relationship. We had been dating for about like a year and a half at that point. And yeah, so she was starting to tell me like you have to get your life together, you have to find a job, you have to learn Czech, you have to do this and that. And part of me was like, yeah, I need to do that. And then, but I was like, I don't know where to start. Like, I'm in a different country. Like, I've been here for a while, but like, I can't get any other jobs because everybody needs these papers, and I can't get these papers. They won't allow it. Just dropped out of college. And I was like, the only thing I have to do is like to buy a laptop and maybe try to figure it out like that. And one night I didn't come home. I like stayed out and partied, and then I was like at an after party and stuff like that, and I didn't come home. And my girlfriend ended up breaking up with me that night, and she was like, "You can come tomorrow at a set time and pick up all your stuff." And she was like, "You have to leave," and I didn't have anywhere to go, and like I didn't have like I had all these friends that I like kind of made top priority over my relationship and all of this, and it was like it's one of those things where you just put so much faith and you're always like high or like drunk that you don't even like think thoroughly or properly about it. So I was like, okay, I don't even care. So I went and got my bags and stuff and I left, and then I was like, okay, well, I have no idea what I'm gonna do now. It was like 2 in the morning. I'm just walking around with like three suitcases in Prague, just like texting everybody I know, like, do you have a couch or something I could sleep on? This, that, and the third. And it became a regular routine for me to uh, go work because I was working at this club like 6 to 7 nights a week usually. It started to become like a regular thing for me to just do my shift until like 3 or 4 in the morning, and then like try to find somebody's couch I could sleep on. And sometimes that wouldn't happen. So if I would get out, I would get off work or stop partying and stuff at like 4 or 5 in the morning, and I wouldn't have anywhere to go. So I would end up sleeping on like benches at a tram stop, or I would like go next to like somebody like a friend's apartment complex or whatever building. I would like go and I would just like chill at the door, just waiting for somebody to text me. And sometimes it would be like 4 or 5 hours before someone would text me and be like, "Yeah, you can come." So, uh, yeah, so I got super depressed at that point, and that's like the first time in a long time, probably since before I ever moved to Europe, that I ever felt like depressed. And uh, I just felt like my whole life just fell apart, and there was nothing I could do about it. And I had been saving up money for my laptop before my before we broke up and I got kicked out and everything. And then the dude who finally said I could like come and sleep on his couch, like indefinitely if I wanted to, he charged me like 8,000 crowns, uh, which 8,000 crowns, it's like 600 or 700 bucks probably to sleep on his couch. And he had a dog that was always bothering me and stuff. So I was like, all my money that was like going to go to getting a laptop that I had been saving up, I had to just spend and like give it all away, basically just to have a place to sleep. And I was still holding on to like this hope that something was going to work out and I was going to be able to like figure it out and stay in Prague. But I got super depressed, and I was like on a lot of drugs and stuff all of the time. But um I started to take like some downers too, some like medication during the day. So like this was like my daily schedule. Like I would go to work at like 7 p.m. and I would drink, I would socialize, I would party, I would sit there depressed and drowning in like Coke and Molly and like alcohol and like anything else you can think of. And then when I would get off work at like 4 or 5, I would wait for somebody to let me in so I could go to their couch. And then I started doing like Xanax every like morning when I went to sleep, and I would sleep all day long. And then at 7 o'clock, I'd have an alarm go off and I'd go to work, and it was just a repeat. And this is like kind of ties into what we said earlier about like your days start repeating and you're doing the same thing and going nowhere. If anything, you're just going downhill fast because you're taking so much stuff. Yeah, that was the roughest point in my life because I was basically homeless in Prague. I was always high. I was always like literally like trying to play around. Like it got to a point where I was just the I've never told this to anybody, and this is like kind of crazy. I'm about to get to the inspirational part in a few minutes, but basically like I was Googling like what combinations of like drugs and stuff could you put together to like increase the chances of fatality. And I
Wow.
found out that it was like Coke and alcohol and Xanax were like one of the top three to actually like, and that's one of the reasons why I started just doing Xanax is I was like, one, I couldn't sleep at all. So I would pop those so I could go to sleep. But one, it was just playing around with the thought of like, if I die, I die. If I live, I live. I guess we'll put it 50-50 and see if how the cards turn out, how the
Wow.
hand goes. And that lasted for like a couple of months. That lasted from like the beginning of February all the way up until May, whenever I called my dad and was like, "Can you buy me a plane ticket?" I was like, "I have to get out of here. I'm like dying, literally." And he was like, "Yeah." So that lasted for a little while, and I got a little bit towards the end on better terms with my ex, and we were trying to work things out. But then as soon as I left and moved back to the States, it would just kind of ended again, just because it was like there's no point in coming from all of that to like getting into a relationship just for you to leave for however long before you move back to Prague. So we kind of like were together for a couple of weeks, which was nice and helped me mentally a little bit. But then that ended when I left, and then I got back to the States, and I had no money. I was in like $6,000 worth of debt, and I didn't have a job. And it's funny because when I came here, I I have a friend that owns a concrete company, and I started doing some like random work for him, like go on travel trips. I went on like four of them, and it paid super well. So it paid well enough to get me out of most of my debt, um, and enough to buy a laptop. And basically, what I was doing as soon as I moved back is I just started getting in courses and trying to learn anything I could about like digital economy, like if it came to marketing, sales, outreach, copywriting, ghostwriting, anything. I was like, I'm trying to learn. And that's when my life kind of switched around. Is like I made a vow to myself at the beginning when I first moved back. I was like, I'm not gonna. I was like, I'm at a low point right now, but if I made a promise to myself, I was like, I'm not gonna get another 9 to 5. I'm gonna either figure it out on my own because I put myself into all this mess. I was like, I'm gonna figure it out for myself with my laptop, and I was like, I'm willing to work for my friend, just because it's every like once every month and a half or something. We do a job and it pays enough to actually get me a little bit of money coming in. Um, but I was like, everything's gonna be on me, and I just started like spending 95% of my day just sitting in this room at this desk on my computer learning things. And then in September, the very end of September, I joined X, and that's when I discovered ghostwriting and I discovered just other ways to make things work online. And yeah, so that was a long drawn out story of that portion of my life, but basically it was like me at my very lowest, like just waiting and hoping to die, to like now my mindset is completely different, and I'm like happy, excited, jump out of bed to come to work at my computer and figure out how I'm going to make money that day and figure out how I'm going to reach my goals, move back to Europe and be sober for the rest of my life and just chill and travel and create.
Wow, man, that's an awesome and inspiring story. And when you were on the rock bottom, when you were on the times that you were thinking about the drug combinations and that kind of thing, what was the point that you think was the turning point? Because then you started trying to get back with your ex, you talked to your dad, you were already trying to find like a lifeline so you could get out of
Yeah.
it. So what do you
Um,
think was the turning point?
I would say that when my ex decided to meet back with me and we were going to dinner or something like that, just like, or lunch or whatever it was, and it just made me like, honestly, it was like I wasn't zooming out on the situation, and I was actually not like seeing it for what it is, kind of like we mentioned at the very beginning. I was like so deep in the eye of the storm that I just didn't. I was like, the storm is me, it's all this, and like when I met up with her, it just kind of put me into a moment of like realization. Like I had everything I needed, and like this girl and her family took care of me for like a super long time, and I'd gone this far, and had all these experiences, and I did all these things, all to end up here. And I was like, I don't know, it was just a switch at one point. I thought about it, and instead of thinking about it in a negative light of like, I just fucked everything up, like I ruined everything I had, it was like, I need to figure out my life because I know I have potential. I was like, I need to figure out my life so that I never do this to somebody else again, and I never do this to myself again. And uh, around that time, even during that time, like I didn't really let up on like the whole like drug usage and stuff like that. Just I was a strong addict, so that's another reason why I was just like I got to get out of here in general because like everybody I know is a drug addict, and I'm the most. addict-y of all the addicts. So I was like, I've got to dip. Um, yeah, I think that was the thing. And then when I came back to the States, I just had a clean slate again. I was able to just reinvent myself again. And now I think I'm about at 8 months clean of drugs. I've been 3 months sober, and like the one time that I drank 3 months ago was like a beer or something. And then I've was smoking cigarettes and stuff all the time, and now I haven't smoked a cigarette in like 4 months. So I'm coming up on like a year without drugs. I'm coming up on like 6 months without alcohol, and I'm off of tobacco too. So my life just did a completely fucking 180, bro.
That's awesome to hear, man. And I've seen a post of yours where you talk about your transformation in terms of your body because you're much healthier now. You were kind of too skinny at that point in time, and
Yeah.
now you've packed in
Yeah.
some muscle and you're looking good.
Yes, sir.
So, so how was that part of that transformation? How do you feel now that you're out of these addictions? And do you feel better? Do you feel more energy? Do you sleep
Yeah.
better?
So when I moved back to the States as well, I was like, I'm gonna cut out all these addictions. And I also was like, I know how bad I became like fascinated with like ingredients and like bad ingredients. Like it's funny, I'll go into this in a second, but like back then I would party, I would like do a whole bag of cocaine. I would be like low key almost overdosing every night on like a bunch of different stuff, but then we would go to like eat somewhere and I would be like, "Oh, I'm not gonna eat." And they'd be like, "Why?" I'd be like, "Just 'cause like you know the ingredients they put in that thing? Like, did you read this?" And it was funny. It was like so like backwards. It was like this whole life was chaotic, and then I was like really cautious about what I put into my body when it came to food or drink. When I came back to the States, though, I started working out again because I was into working out years ago before I ever moved to Prague. I was into the gym a little bit here and there, not consistently when I was in Prague as well. But when I came back, I got a gym membership and just started working out every day, pretty much like 5 or 6 days a week. Going back into my old routine that I did like 5 years ago. I also made the decision to fast to do one meal a day every day so that not only would I cut out all the other addictions that I had, but I wouldn't get re-addicted to food here in the States, especially because the States is definitely unhealthier when it comes to their ingredients and their food and all of that. So yeah, so I only eat once a day. I'm on a 2 or 3 day fast right now. I just started it today. So I barely eat and I sleep really well. I try to make sure that I try to go to bed at 11 every night and then I try to wake up at 7 every morning. Um, I only eat dinner. I do 24-hour fasts and I honestly I've never felt more like energetic and alive in my entire life. And it kind of shows the power of like everyone is addicted to something, and that's why it's like I have all these crazy and wild stories about all of these addictions and stuff. But like people are addicted to McDonald's, people are addicted to like snacking, and now it's like I I'm almost never hungry either, and that's the funny part is like I almost never eat, but I'm also never hungry. So it's like by the time my because my body adjusted so much to it, so it's like by the time it's dinner and I'm ready to eat my one meal a day, a lot of the times I don't even eat very much just because I'm not that hungry. And I'm energetic for work all day. I'm energized to go to the gym every day. And when I moved back to the States, I was like 150 pounds, 155 pounds. I can't think of what it is in kilograms, but now I'm like 180, 185 pounds, and that's off of no food and almost pure just working out. So kind of shows like how deteriorated my body was before to be able to put on 30 pounds of muscle.
Without barely eating.
Yeah,
Yeah, man, I think in intermittent fasting, or in your case, it's pretty much the biggest schedule, like one meal a day. It really helps. I've done it a lot as well, and like you said, you don't even feel hungry anymore when like your body adjusts and
yeah,
your blood sugar is kind of stable all day, so you don't feel so much craving for food
yeah,
or especially for sweets.
yeah. That's a fact because it's like your body adjusts to never having it, so you almost lose the taste. you're like you lose the taste. Like people wake up and they're like, oh, so my problem now is coffee. I drink a ton of coffee. I probably need to cut back, but I'm like if I go through all of this, like I'm allowed to have coffee, you know? Like I'll allow myself coffee.
Yeah. It's a
But
better
it's funny
vice.
though, yeah, for real. But it's funny though because like so many people they wake up and they're like, "Oh, I'm good for nothing if I don't have breakfast, or I'm good for nothing if I don't have my Pop Tart, or like I'm good for nothing if I didn't have lunch today, so I can't work properly." And I'm just like a living testament that you would be perfectly fine without eating if you actually wanted to. I know that everybody's bodies are different too, but at least for me, um, at least for me, it's worked wonders.
Yeah, I think it's all about biohacking and trying to figure out what's best for you and with your genetics, with your own body, what like there are people that might be lactose intolerant, but they can eat gluten as much as they want and vice versa. And it's all about figuring out what's good for your body and what kind of ingredients you should be eating all the time, what kind of things make you sick and you shouldn't eat anymore. So, like you did, you sort of tried doing something new and fasting was good for you, so why not, right?
Yeah. I think that that's a big problem that people have in like all areas of life, like whether it's just eating or whether it's business or whether it's workout plans or kind of anything that you get into. I feel like people are always looking for someone to carve the path out for them. So if you look at it from like a diet plan, it's like I tried this diet, I tried that diet, I tried this other diet, and none of them worked for me. So like fuck all diets, like nothing's good for me. So I'm just gonna eat whatever I want. I'll just be normal. And then it's like sometimes you gotta like take one of this guy's five ideas, and then two of this guy's 10 ideas, and then this guy's, and then kind of jumble it all together, and you get something amazing. But people are lazy, I think, and people don't. People are lazy, and people don't have like the determination. I feel like to actually make some of those changes. And that's like an interesting conversation in and of itself is like why are people unmotivated to actually figure out what works for them. And I think that a lot of that stems from just the lack of relationship that they have with themselves. Like if I ask you your favorite color and you if I ask somebody their favorite color, a lot of people probably wouldn't be able to tell me their favorite color. If I ask them what they're here for, a lot of people wouldn't be able to tell me what they're here for. It's the same thing. It's like, why don't you train, or why don't you like eat properly, or why are you not motivated to like figure out how to live your best life? And it's just all kind of stems from the same thing. It's like that external, internal fight that everyone struggles with.
Yeah, I think many people today have first a lack of purpose, so they don't have something greater that they're striving for. So they kind of get lost, and it's like when you don't know where you're going, any road goes like you're
Yeah,
going nowhere anyway. So,
yeah. I saw a tweet. I saw a tweet the other day, and it was the guy said like you could be stuck in a jungle and chop your way out and still get nowhere, and you could be in a yeah, you could chop you could be chopping forever and never find your way out of the jungle. But it's like if you actually have like one path and you chop that way forever, then you will eventually get somewhere, like eventually. And it kind of like ties into the same thing. There's like deep roots I feel like that people have to resolve for themselves, and it ends up becoming like it's kind of like a lack of self-love. Um,
yeah.
I think that that's the biggest thing, which just is, kind of ties in perfectly with the internal that I always speak about. Just people don't love themselves enough, and not only that, but they love things externally that too much. It's like you'll worship a celebrity, but you won't find time to eat right, or you won't write and like ask yourself what your values are, or ask yourself what your favorite color is. That this guy's birthday.
Yeah, there's a lot of escapism. This is how we say it in English. Like people they don't like themselves, they don't try to know themselves, and then they look for things in the external, but actually they should be looking internally. Like
Hmm.
you can be in the best of situations and you can be depressed, and you can be in a shitty situation and you can feel great.
Yeah,
It's more about the perception you have than the things itself.
yeah. I saw. I read something the other day and it was talking about compounding and it's been stuck on my mind recently and it was like everything in life compounds. Like no matter what you look at, it's somehow compounding. And it's like if you see things through a negative pair of glasses, it's just going to compound more and more negatively for the rest of until you decide to take the glasses off. And the same thing positive. It's like if you're always looking for the positive things, then the positivity is just going to compound, and that's what ends up like shaping your reality is like when you start seeing. I think a lot of it is gratitude too. Like you have to be grateful. You have to be grateful for the small things just because it's like you're blessed or fortunate to have a breath this morning. You were fortunate to open your eyes and get to experience this even if you're in a bad situation. Like you could have you could not have that, you know. You could be a millionaire or a brokey, but like you said, this millionaire could like hate his life and have no fulfillment, and this brokey could have like a happy little family who barely get by, but they love each other. You know, that's
Yeah.
gratitude.
Yeah, like you said, we should be happy for the small things. Like, oh, I'm eating a delicious sandwich today. That's great. Oh, the sun is shining. That's great. Or oh, it's rainy. You shouldn't feel like, oh, it's rainy. I'm gloomy. I'm feeling blue.
Yeah,
No, it's rainy. It's good. It's good as well. It's
I think
water for
that
the plants.
yeah, I think that a lot of people though, and it's I think a lot of people lack a faith in something though, like whether that faith is the universe or God or whatever you wanna whatever you believe in. I think a lot of people don't believe in anything, or they want to believe in something, but they don't like. There's not enough like answers to the questions to actually like put that together. So it's like if you truly like an atheist, for instance, like if you truly believe that there's no higher power in any form, then what do you have to be grateful for? Like the only thing lucky was to something crashing into the earth and creating a big bang theory and all of this, and like that's how you're here. You have no purpose, you know? And I feel like when people lack a sense of purpose, they have no reason to be grateful for anything because they're not lucky to be here. They have to be here, you know? If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes, I think it does help if you believe in something greater that in our society people usually call God,
Hmm.
but not necessarily. I think, of course, there are many atheists who are depressed because of what you just said,
Hmm.
of a lack of purpose. But in this, at the same time, there are people that say, okay, so there's no purpose to life, so let's create our purpose. So let's
Yeah,
find a purpose for me or something that
yeah.
makes sense for me, and then even then they can find joy.
That's very true because it's all about like the perspective too, like the people's perception, like you mentioned earlier. Because like you can also have like a religious person or someone who believes in the universe or believes in God, who can be depressed and unhappy and not grateful just as much as it can be like show them the meaning of their life. It's just everybody's different, but there's patterns that you find. And it's interesting to try to figure out like where the patterns come from and like what is actually like the reason. Like if you could get inside of every single person's mind and actually realize like why they have like these self-limiting beliefs or why they don't feel that there's a purpose or like why they're not interested in finding that. I don't know. I find it kind of fascinating.
Yeah, I love to talk about that kind of things as well. Have you ever looked into the personality types like
Yeah,
MBTI, that kind of thing?
yeah, I have. I'm a ENFPA.
ENFP?
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I'm supposed to be INTJ, so the archetypical villain
Oh,
of
really?
movies and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, those I want to research more into personality types because this like emotion regulation course that I want to come out with eventually, like one day, um, I want to try to take inspiration from different personality types and create my own personality test so that if I end up creating like a course or some sort of coaching, that people can take this personality test that is based around like emotions and stuff like that, what triggers them, and it'll be divided into different like personality types that I create so that whenever they enter my course kind of meets them at where they're at. So
Hmm.
it's not like a one for everybody because everyone's different, especially in emotions. So I'm pretty fascinated with that. I haven't learned as much as I should or put it together as much as I should so far. But that's kind of a goal I have with that is to end up building my own personality tests so that when people come into my course for emotions, um, I can kind of like help them based on where they're at and like what emotions bother them and
Yeah, I
etc.
think this is a fantastic idea, especially with this idea of trying to figure out where they are or the types of things that trigger them and trying to sort of meet them halfway. I think the base of the idea, the seed that you have already is pretty interesting.
In what ways would you say?
Well, for instance, I'd like to take a course like that. Like I think especially the concept itself of separating people so you don't have a one size fits all kind of course. You have, at the end of the day, you kind of have many different courses that,
Hmm.
or at least like a few archetypes of the course that you can give to different types of people.
Yeah,
And I think this kind of concept of having an education that's more tailored to the person's specific needs is interesting because when you think about the school system, even today, it's too one size fits all. So you
yeah,
teach everyone the same thing, and people have different interests, different talents, and you end up having something that's suboptimal for everyone. It's not good for anyone,
yeah,
actually.
exactly. That's also another avenue that I've thought about when it comes to the course that I want to build is like not only have personality types that people get like put into like a certain section that relates to them, but because emotion regulation is something that like 95% of people in the world probably could use a little bit of help or guidance with. Um, I've also thought about creating like ranks for them of like people who are busy, like if they're CEOs, people who are normal, people who are entrepreneurs, like dads, moms, parents, I don't know, college students and stuff like that. Something that's more universal and more tailored to fit not only your personality type and what you struggle with, but also fit like your time and like it kind of like would put you in like if I'm dealing with a CEO for instance, it would be a little bit different than if I was dealing with like a 20-year-old college student, you know, because like they both are busy, but they're busy in different ways and they both have different like levels of intellect and they both deal with different kinds of stress and problems, as similar as they are. I don't know, there's a lot to go into it. I'm a little focused on ghostwriting right now just because I want to like make sure that I'm set when it comes to like all my finances and everything and just getting that going. But eventually down the line, I've already done some like blueprints for it and come up with like a bunch of ideas, but that's something in the next like year I would like to have going.
Yeah, I saw one of your blueprints, probably the last one you put out, and yeah, it sparked some interest in me, maybe because I already like this kind of thing of human
Hmm.
psychology and emotional regulation and that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. But yeah, man, let's talk about ghostwriting.
Okay.
Why did you decide that you wanted to learn about ghostwriting? And you have kind of popped up in X already. You have over 2,000 followers. So, dude, tell us about this journey.
Yeah, so whenever I first came on X in September, I didn't know anything about the platform and I knew a lot about I knew a little bit about a lot of things, but I didn't know where to direct it. And one of the very first things I did whenever I came on X was I like popped in on a master class with Talon Simmons, and I didn't know who Talon Simmons was, never heard of him. And it was like a master class on ghostwriting. And it really like sparked my interest because I love writing. I've been writing for journaling, I should say, for like years now. And um, at that point, like it's funny because back then, when I got into writing, always I always said I wanted to become a writer someday. I felt like I was called to write, but I thought I had to release a book or like become an author to write something because I didn't know anything about like digital online business. So I heard like the master class with Talon Simmons talking about ghostwriting, and I started just looking deep diving into it and looking at like how all of it works. And then at that point, I got reached out to by someone who's now my mentor, and he we hopped on a call, and then I ended up paying him for his ghostwriting mentorship, and that kind of like set everything off for me, and that's how I got so deep into it. Just my love and passion for writing mixed with like kind of the stars aligning with who I met and everything at perfect times and scenarios.
So a bit of serendipity, a bit of your personal passions.
Yeah, it's kind of everything. It just feels right, at least for right now. Plus, like mixed with like how I talked about earlier about just observing people and like always thinking about like the psychological reasons or the psychological things behind people. I feel like it's a good a good fit for me because I love writing and I also love like low key trying to become an empath, and that's like literally all ghostwriting is. It's like writing, psychology, and like having the empathy of being able to like write in someone else's voice and like take their experiences and like put emotion to it that they would feel and not necessarily that I would feel.
Yeah, man. And how do you see things going forward now? Because everyone talks about becoming a personal brand, that everyone should have their own personal brand. And at the same time, we have this surge of AI and sort of a lot of things going stale, a lot of things going bland. Like you talked about in the beginning, there are many people that are just posting platitudes out there and things that probably they use.
Yeah.
So, how do you see the future in the next few years?
When it comes to content creation and like X overall, I feel like the opportunities are so high for people that will actually take action on them. Like outreach, for instance. I've been on big about outreach lately because I made a post about it the other day just because I was like, every DM that I get is like a fake compliment, and then it goes from a fake compliment into like some stupid pitch about like getting me followers or helping me lose weight or put on 30 pounds of muscle or just whatever it is. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, there's no better opportunity to like figure out your systems and nail them down to actually land clients or get jobs or connect with people or just set yourself apart. Um, I think that with that though, it's the bar is so low that you really have to like start structuring your writing and like however you want to create content in a way that is super authentic to you, which we also mentioned earlier because I feel like the whole everybody posts like a platitude or something here and there or just like some clever thing to say. Like it's natural to do it and it's not bad, I don't think, once in a while, but your content shouldn't be like reading something you could have chat GPT prompt for you, you know? And that goes from like outreach to building your personal brand. I just don't see I think building a personal brand is super important, but I also at the same time think that most people are doing it wrong. And that goes with like chasing vanity metrics in a big way. It's people start loving the likes early. They get on X and instead of like keeping themselves aligned with why they're there to start a business, to do something, they start getting tunnel vision to like how many likes they can get. And if you post 10 posts and five of them are platitudes and five of them are personal stories, and the personal stories get 10 likes and the platitudes get 500 likes, it's easy as a beginner to start thinking like, oh, well, I just need to keep posting platitudes. When in reality, it's like that may get you a fair amount of followers and that may give you a million impressions in a month. But at the end of the day, it's not really doing anything because people don't really like connect with you. So I think that there's a lot of potential and opportunity for people that will do it right.
So, how would you describe doing it right? Like being more, well, putting yourself out there and not being so serious about it, talking more about um, your vulnerabilities as well. How would you describe the right way of going with this?
I would say the right way is kind of strong to say. It was probably a poor word choice on my part because I think that there's always multiple ways to do something right, and it's
Well,
different
the
for
Judson
everybody.
way then.
Yeah, the Judson way, I would say definitely being more vulnerable and being more open. And you don't even have to be open about like your darkest times or whatever, but just like tell personal personalities, stories, post personality things like hot takes, something that actually I you could read what I post and actually feel like you know something about me and know something enough about me to where you want to follow me or like keep up with me. A big thing about that is spaces. Spaces help tremendously when it comes to like growth and personal brand because you got a lot of people out there who may be able to write something well, but they can't speak very well. And I feel like if you can speak, at least try to speak well, and like it helps you articulate your points, and like I think that they go hand in hand, where if you can speak well, you clarify your thoughts and a better way to write them, and vice versa. And so I think spaces are a big thing. And one thing that I'm still not even like 100% with is just creativity, because I see people like there's Tommy Christie, there's like a bunch of other, there's like three or four that I can't think of the names. I think one's name is Sabrina, and you just read their posts, and they don't even have to necessarily be about anything, but you can read it and you get like, you're like, okay, waiting for the next line, and you feel the energy, like you can almost see the person typing behind the keyboard, like, oh, I'm fucking pumped about writing this. And then you read it on your timeline and you're like, oh shit, like this is a fire ass tweet. And just the ability to actually do that, and trying to find like, trying to hone in on that creativity, which I think takes a lot of like personal development in a way. Personal development mixed with learning and constantly learning, like studying words, studying wordplay, studying things to actually have something to talk about. I'd say that, in my opinion, that's probably the best way. You just want to grow organically, and you want to grow and make people like you, because at the end of the day, if you're building a personal brand, it's so that you can do something, you can sell somebody something someday, or you can just have like a lot of people who like your stuff and like make friends. However you want to go about it, or your goal, you have to be likable, and you have to like post things that are worthy of getting other people to read it.
Yeah, I think one thing that's interesting about this is when you go into a lot of spaces and there are these people that there are the stars of the spaces, so you kind of always remember them. When you read their posts on the timeline, I don't know if you have this as well, but sometimes I can listen to the person's voice
Yeah,
while
dude.
I'm reading.
That with
Yeah,
I do that with Tommy Christie a lot. You know Tommy Christie?
no, but you're talking so much about him, I'll try to
If you
follow him
ever
now.
hear like him in a space, dude, he's got the most unique voice that you ever heard. So it's like every time I hear him or like read one of his posts, I just hear him speaking it. And it's like when you can ingrain your name or your like image into somebody's mind that much naturally, then that's when you start, when you know you're building a personal brand.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, man. And when you first started on Spaces, were you a bit shy about speaking or?
Yeah, I was a lurker on Spaces for my first like 2 or 3 weeks on X, when I got in September. It wasn't until like mid September or mid October of last year where I actually started speaking. And there's a guy named Greg Lunt, and he was hosting a space, and I had been lurking in his spaces here and there. It was like between like three people that I didn't really know anything. I was just like trying to listen for things that could maybe help me figure out like how to my direction on X. And it was like one of those things where you're a little bit like scared to get up on talk, because you're new to the platform and you new to all of this. So it's like, am I gonna sound stupid, or like are all these people gonna be like, fuck this guy, and all of that. So it was like I was a lurker, and then he had a space one time where he was like preaching like people to actually come up on and speak on spaces and like host your own spaces and do that. And I ended up joining that space. I requested the mic and I started talking on it, and then I think the next day I just ran my own space. I was like, I met somebody and I was like, let's do a space. And then I did spaces. I did like, I think 10 within the month of November. And then I think I checked last, I've spoken in like maybe 150 or 200 spaces since I've in the last like 3.5 months. So it's just all about getting more comfortable, you know, like, uh, and you do that with just practicing. And same thing when it comes to writing, or like finding your voice when it comes to writing or speaking, like you do it by doing it more.
Wow, 150, 200 spaces. How do you even keep count of that, man?
I can send you the link after this. There's I didn't actually keep count, but there's a website that I can send you, and you can look up like anybody's X
Oh,
username, and
okay.
it'll show you like all of their history for spaces.
Okay, thought you were like uh, a neat freak that OCD the thing and put it into an Excel file or something like that. And had everything, like
Somebody
how
did.
many, yeah,
Somebody
how
did
many
that.
minutes I spoke, and
No, that's not me, but somebody did that. Somebody made it automatic.
yeah, yeah. By making it automatic is easier, I guess. But
It'd be a little of a hassle and probably take too much time to actually track every minute you spoke on a space. That's a
yeah,
little
yeah,
bit
it would
like
be.
that's a side quest I'm not trying to go on.
Yeah, a bit overboard, right? You already have too many main quests to
Yeah,
work on.
exactly.
And as I was looking at your profile, I took a look at the links you have there, and one of them is to Fitbiz. So, what is Fitbiz?
Yeah, Fitbiz is a community that I joined pretty much right away on X as well, and that's how I got into the masterclass with Taylor Simmons. There's two guys that kind of own the community, and they're pretty big accounts on Twitter. One is Humble Flow, and the other one is called Lift Your Mind. And they have this community on Telegram with like I think it's like 120 people now, and basically they people in the chat just like talk about X and like talk about like uh business and just like give good tips, and then like three times a week they get some businessman or like somebody on X, like somebody who knows what they're talking about, to come in and do like a hour long masterclass. So that is one of the things that put me on the right direction, is just like linking with them and finding them almost immediately, and then just having those like video calls, because like for instance Taylor Simmons, I think last time I checked it was like $600 or $800 to have an hour long phone call with him, and I pay $30 a month, and I get that masterclass that completely changed my whole outlook on Twitter and everything, along with like probably 30 others since I've been on Twitter. So it's well worth it.
Yeah, that was my next question actually, if it was worth it or not.
Yeah, definitely worth it. Yeah, I think that if you're like have the time to like actually be a part of the community and to be a part of the community and like listen to the master classes and stuff, that there's nothing bad about that. I think it's super good.
And do you think of building your own community down the line?
I haven't put too much thought. Like I have a community that I kind of helped start almost with a couple of my friends. It's not big. It's like 20 people. We haven't really done that much with it. But I think community is something that I'm not necessarily taking that like seriously. Like I know that there's some people on X, Audrey is the first person that comes to my mind, who's like kind of whole personal brand is built around community. And I understand the positives of actually building a community, but I also just I want to come to a point where I can actually feel like I'm giving them value and like doing something. So I think maybe when I come out with that emotion regulation course and I start diving deeper into that side of my personal brand, because ultimately that's where I end up wanting to take my personal brand. I want it to be just all about emotions. All my content's about like emotions, and I'm that. So I think that later on down the line, I would like to build a community based on that. So if anybody like has questions or comments or anything, we can all just like talk about it, and I can help people in the chat and stuff.
Yeah, man, I think this might come up earlier than you're thinking then, if you put out your course earlier.
Yeah, I still gotta put it together. Um, it's still in like the early stages. There's still ways to go, and right now I made a post about this as well. Like I was getting my mind was getting discombobulated. I was doing like 12 things at once, and I had like all these goals and stuff that I was trying to like time block, like 45 minutes to outreach, 45 minutes to client work, 45 minutes to uh, building my course, 45 minutes to like learning about more to build my course on, and etc. And when you start doing that, that becomes like a little bit of a hassle. When if I use all 4 hours to do outreach or use all 4 hours to actually do client work or something like that, I would be making more money immediately, and that's something that is more important at the moment. So that's why it's kind of taking a back seat for now, the emotion stuff.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, sometimes you have to kind of go into seasons, I guess. So now might be more of an outreach season for you. Or for instance, for me now, this week and next week are a recording season. So I'm having a bunch of episodes to record. And I think it ends up being easier. Like if you go to the gym and you do one exercise per muscle group for that day, I don't think it's as effective as if you go and today I'm going to do just push, today I'm going to do just pull or just legs, you know?
Yeah, like actually designating a day for different muscle groups. Yeah, because if you,
Yeah.
let's say you only do, I don't know, let's say you only do bench press for chest. If you do only one workout for every single part of your body, you wouldn't get see results as fast as if you did 5 chest workouts on the same day.
Yeah, man, exactly. And you told me that you were obsessed with creating stories for your action figures when you were a kid.
Yeah, I was. Yeah,
So,
that's one of the things that I love to do. I loved building. I anything that had to do with Legos or anything like that. And when I was younger, I had a collection of like tons of action figures, like Star Wars action figures, GI, like the tiny ones, not like the Barbie kind, but just like the little ones. And I had like all these vehicles for them, and we had like a box full of Lincoln Logs, if you know what those are, they're just like little toy logs that you can like build stuff out of. And that mixed with my Legos, I used to be able to play with those all day, dude. I before I got into video games, I used to literally pull all of my stuff out, build like cities out of all of the stuff that I had, and then just create stories just out of pure imagination of like that would last sometimes like 2 days. I'd be like taking my action figures, making every movement with each one, having like conversations, having like storylines and stuff, and they could go on forever. Like I used to go to bed and have my action figures in like different places and stuff, and then I would go to sleep, and then I'd wake up in the morning, and then I would go back and just like keep going with the story until I finished it. Until my dad like threw all of it into a box or something, and I was like, well, I gotta restart.
yeah, it was like the next episode, next
Yeah,
morning then.
that was interesting. Just to have the imagination like that to just carry stories on for like days, just off the top of your head. Children.
Yeah, so you always like this architecture kind of thing and building and also
Yeah,
the human part with the characters and their stories. So pretty much as a kid, you already like the same things you still like today, I guess.
yeah, just different levels.
And you also said that you're obsessed with deep convos. I hope so far we've gotten deep enough. And
Yeah,
if you want to, we can go even deeper.
it's okay. I think we've gone pretty deep. It's
So, what's the meaning of life for you, since you like to talk about it?
The meaning of life is something that I still wouldn't say I've nailed down. Um, I told you at the beginning that I grew up in like a religious Christian family and everything. So I grew up for like the first 18 years of my life, like believing in God, going to church, doing all the reading the Bible, doing all of this. And then obviously my life changed when I moved to Europe and everything. And I was completely away from all of that. And I've done tons of psychedelics. And I don't know if you've ever done any psychedelics, but it opens your mind up to so many different like avenues and like questions and like you see things differently and it changes your perspective on life. And I feel like I've had so many different perspectives, and like if there's something about me, I've talked to people about this before. When I have a conversation, I don't like calling things arguments or having fights or something. I like conversations because ultimately won't always take your advice if you have something to say. Like I have my own grounding that I like stand by, etc. But I like having a database in my mind of like different conversations I have with people and hearing all their different takes on like the meaning of life or like just different avenues of life in general. And I kind of like I always say when I enter a conversation, I like to be able to bring up like 7 different perspectives, and it can be against me and my beliefs, it can be against you and your beliefs, but just something to throw the conversation off that I've heard somebody else say before or that somebody else thinks. And I've done that a lot in my life, and I feel like it's gotten to the point where so many things make sense and so many things don't make sense, but it's hard to just try to figure out what you actually believe in because I would say now I would lean towards God I believe now at this point, and just seeing all my experiences in life, and where the world is, I would say I would lean more towards God. But then at the same time, it's kind of like an agnostic take, and the fact that I also can see that nobody's right and everybody's wrong, and we all have it wrong, and somebody else got it right maybe. Just because it's fascinating to me how so many people could be like willing to die for what they believe, and all believe something completely different, and that's what's crazy to me. And I have a take. I have a I have like a little bit of a take on this that I came up with a while back, and I almost feel like it could be something that if there is like a universe, then everybody should have something in their life to give them meaning. So if it's like if you believe in God, or you believe in the universe, or you believe in nothing, or you believe in Islam, or whatever route you end up taking, maybe the point of all of this is that you find something that makes you want to like wake up the next morning and like go do it for something bigger. And maybe at the end of the day, like if you believe in heaven, you go to heaven. And if this person believes in reincarnation, maybe that person gets reincarnated, and maybe this is all a simulation of our minds. And that's like that kind of stuff is crazy, because then maybe it's not. Maybe none of that is right.
Yeah, I love these kinds of talks. The other day I was talking to Redham.
Hmm.
Do you know Frederick Dodson, the author?
Frederick Dodson, the name sounds familiar.
You know Levels of Energy,
I've heard of
the
it.
book. Dude, awesome book. And we were talking about, well, we started talking about his books and stuff, and we ended up talking about a bunch of different topics. But Fred, he had some problems when he was a kid. He says he used to be abducted when he was a child. And
Oh wow.
his parents took him to many doctors, and they could, because he had like some markings on his skin, and it couldn't possibly have been himself because there were places that he couldn't possibly reach. So they took him to doctors and they couldn't explain it. They took him to the priest, they took him to a bunch of stuff and they couldn't explain it. So he was like 8, 9, 10, 12 years old, and he was reading about all of the religious scriptures, all of the philosophies, everything to try to find something to give him solace. Not saying if he actually was abducted or not, not going to go into that rabbit hole,
Yeah.
but since he got exposed to so many of these philosophies, he has this view that's pretty much all encompassing of a bit of this, a bit of that, trying to find like a meaning of life, or something that kind of permeates all of the religions or all of those ideologies. So it's
Hmm.
very interesting, and I really recommend his books, and
Yeah,
especially
I just
Levels
wrote
of
it down.
Energy. Yeah, man, because yeah, because he's super open-minded, like almost to the point of nonsense of being too open-minded, really. And
Yeah.
since you like that kind of stuff of thinking about different possibilities and realities, I think you'll like it.
Yeah, I wrote it down. I'll go ahead and order it here soon. Look into it. Yeah,
Yeah, man.
I think that that's a huge key in people's lives, is if people were more open-minded. I I I think that it's takes a bit of grounding too. Like you have to be grounded, but also open-minded. And if not open-minded enough to actually believe what somebody else says, but open-minded enough to understand why they believe what they believe. I feel like when I get into conversations and stuff, I like to understand. If I get anything out of the conversation, I like to learn why you believe what you believe. And after a while, when you've had conversations and deep conversations with so many people, it kind of boosts you in empathic ways, just because like you relate to people a whole lot, even who believe completely different than you, just because you understand. And most people, we don't live in a world really of understanding. The world has grown to be a little more hateful, and like I'm right and you're wrong, and confrontational. And confrontation isn't bad. I like confrontation, but the understanding behind it is important, to understand that people didn't live the life you lived, and they see the world differently than you.
Yeah, man, I think people tend to see these things too black or white, and there are many shades of gray, and especially when you think that people were born in a different place. They had a totally different upbringing. The culture was different. So, of course, they're going to have a different view. And you don't necessarily need to believe the same things they believe, but it's interesting to do this thought experiment. Like, if I was born in another place, how would I be? What would I think?
Yeah. And the nicest thing about that is like you can think about it for yourself, or you can just go meet those people and actually try to understand where they're coming from, you know? And it
Yeah.
raises your curiosity in general. Like you're not having boring conversations with random people. You're actually like there for a reason. You're there to like figure out like, and not only that, but it like can raise a lot of questions that they can go on and ask themselves too after the conversation. That's one thing that I had mentioned a few minutes ago, where like if I'm having a conversation with you and I believe this and you believe this, and then I come in and I give a third perspective that doesn't even go along with either of our beliefs, at least you can walk away from that conversation and question, you know? It gives you something to think about if you're open to think about this thing.
Yeah, yeah, you give the person at least a seed of curiosity so they can rethink something,
Yeah.
or not necessarily they will. Many times they won't even entertain the thought, but
Mhm.
at least you tried.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like you do that enough times, it goes back into the whole thing that we talked about earlier about posting open things and like some people may never reply and you may never know it helps somebody. But then it's like same thing when it comes to conversations. If you're careful with your words and your understanding, and you can always bring a different perspective from what you believe and what others believe and understand that, then I feel like a lot of times you can end up helping somebody in ways that you'll never know about.
Yeah, man. And going back to these things that we talked more in the beginning, like if you could go back to that kid that was working at like waking up at 2, 3 a.m. to do valet and then going to school and then going to the grocery store to work again. Like if you could go back and talk to him, what kind of advice would you give him?
This is a tough one, dude, because like part of me now wishes that I would have still moved to Europe and all of that, but I would have been smarter about it. But then at the same time, I I always have to answer this question with if I went back in time, I would tell him to make the same decisions, like do what your heart desires, like go and experience, follow your plan. I would say that I would go back and tell him to have a better mindset through it all, try to create some sort of vision and something to look forward to, and actually work towards. Because I feel like I could have still experienced all the things I experienced in Prague, like drug wise, and all those experiences, while still having put more time dedicated to actually building something. Because I had friends over there that did that were making like $15,000 a month, and they were out partying with me and stuff like that. They were just like they had their as much as they didn't have their life together, they had their lives together. So it's like um, that's the only thing that I would say. But for the most part, I have to answer that question with like do exactly what you did, because 5 years from now, you're going to be here on a podcast with Gabriel, and you're going to be able to tell stories about how you changed your life.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. So, yeah, at the end of the day, you wouldn't change that much. Or maybe you could look at what your friends that were making that kind of money. And I'm even curious, like, how did they do this?
Yeah, one guy was
And
early in drop shipping. Uh, one guy was early in drop shipping, and then the other guy, I don't know what the other guy did, to be honest. But I know one of my friends, he was making crazy money, and he was doing drop shipping mainly, some copywriting here and there. But yeah, I would say that if I did have one thing, it would be move to Europe with a laptop and don't sell your laptop. Because at least then, throughout all my struggles, I would have had something to actually learn.
yeah, that would make your life much easier, I guess. At
Yeah,
least you could drop ship as well.
I know, right? Could have done something.
Yeah, man. And when you were in Europe, we talked a bit about your lows, but we didn't talk too much about your highs. Like not literally the highs.
You gotta
But
clarify that.
yeah, yeah. What were the favorite places you went to? The places you liked most apart from Prague?
I went to Paris once, and I loved Paris. I had a time period where I went to Berlin for like 13 weekends in a row, just because I really liked Berlin. I had kind of obviously I had an obsessive personality, so I was like, I liked Berlin when I went there, so I was like, I'm gonna keep going back for a little while until I'm bored of it. And then it was pretty close, anyways, to Prague, like 3.5 hours on train. So Berlin was awesome. Um, Paris was fun because my dream growing up was to see the Eiffel Tower. And throughout that trip, I was able to. I still don't know if there's elevators in the Eiffel Tower, but I don't know if there are or there aren't. But all I know is like one of the nights I walked like halfway up by stair up the Eiffel Tower, and then I got really tired, and then I just walked back down with my friends. So I walked halfway up the Eiffel Tower by stairs. Who knows if they have an elevator? I still don't. Um,
I'm pretty sure they do, man.
Yeah, I think they do too, bro. I think they do. I could not find it at that night. That's a story for another time. Um, France. I went to Italy last year in March to Milan. Had pneumonia at the time, or bronchitis or something, so I was kind of dying the entire time. But that was super fun because I have my heritage on my mom's side, like my lineage were Italian. So my mom's always dreamed of going to Italy because her grandma like grew up in Italy. So it was fun to see like um, that country. And then the most beautiful place I would say outside of Prague, it was Portugal,
Where did you go in Portugal?
Lisbon.
Yeah, Portugal is pretty cool. The food there is great, and
Yeah,
it's kind of cheap in terms of European prices.
not bad. And then my whole visa process was taken care of in Vienna, Austria. Vienna was beautiful, but I was going there so much with like for like business, getting my visa done that I kind of got tired of it really fast because I was there quite a bit.
Yeah, I need to go to Vienna, man. The architecture there is also great, right?
Yeah, beautiful.
Like, yeah, I need to go
And they,
there
I
next
love
time.
art. I love art museums, and they have some pretty nice art museums there.
Yeah. Dude, so this we have pretty similar, I guess, because I also like architecture a lot and art and going to museums and things that
Uh,
most people find boring,
I
but I
know.
really like to do this.
Me too. I for my birthday I went to New York for like 2 days with my dad, and the sole purpose of me going to New York was just so that I could see The Starry Night by Van Gogh because it's my favorite painting. And I was like, while I'm back in America, I've got to go see this painting. So me and him went to like two art museums up there, the Met, and then I can't think of the other one right now. But we went to the two big art museums up in New York, and that was super fun. And I've been to the Louvre, so I've seen Mona Lisa. I've kind of like somewhere in my phone, I think I've got like a document of like all the top paintings that I've ever seen. I'm trying to like add them all up, trying to see everything.
Yeah, yeah. But isn't the Mona Lisa kind of underwhelming though when you get there?
When you get there, it sucks too because it's such like a immaculate painting for it to like be a super long line, and when you get to the front of the line, you're still like 15 feet away from the Mona Lisa, so you've got to like zoom in on your camera because you can't
Yeah,
see it.
yeah, man. But anyways, it's kind of mesmerizing when you get to be a few feet away from one of those grand works of art and you
Yeah,
know that it was like Michelangelo or Da Vinci that painted it, and
I
you're like,
know.
that's so fucking awesome to imagine those guys did it, man.
I know. Just like imagining them with like their paintbrush on that same exact piece of painting, just like doing it one day. I'm like, it does something to me because I love art so much. To other people, it's like, cool. I'm like, no,
Yeah,
it's fucking
boring.
amazing.
Yeah,
But I also love
I
to
feel
paint.
it too.
Yeah, I love to paint. So it's like one of those things. It all just goes together. It's like I feel like painting is like one of the ultimate forms of creating.
Yeah, I used to paint when I was a kid. Like
Hmm.
my grandma was kind of an artist and she used to teach art class to kids and stuff. So I even was like I don't know how it's like there was this thing in I think it was a museum or something like that.
Hmm.
And they even put my paintings, and I was like 4 years old or something like that.
Oh wow.
It was kind of ridiculous, but I guess she was friends with the guys there. So.
That's funny. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, man. I guess that's why I also like art so much. Art in
There's always
general,
something
really.
from your, yeah, there's always something from your childhood that makes you like certain things. Although I think everybody's kind of born a creative, people just kind of lose the sight of that throughout their life.
Yeah, I think as we are growing up, we are not like stimulated to lean into our creative sides as much. Or,
Yeah.
of course, parents don't do this on purpose, but they try to steer you into a more predictable path or a more safe path, and not necessarily the best path for you, but yeah, it happens.
Yeah, or just teachers or something like that. Everything is
As
like
well, yeah.
everything's kind of conditioning you to be less and less creative, and then more and more societal. And then by the time you get to be 20 and you go to college and stuff, your life is so much different, and you're like, oh, everybody used to paint when they were 4. Everybody used to love drawing when they were like 7. But then you talk to them at 23, and it's like, oh, I watch Netflix or TikTok is what I do all day. Okay.
Yeah, man, we kind of forget the things that we were good at or the things that were special, and
Yeah.
that's kind of sad, I guess.
It is, and it's like you got two people in the world usually, and it's like people who are creatives and people who say that they're. One second.
Yeah.
Sorry, my AirPods dead. Um, you got people who are creatives, and then you got people who aren't creatives, and or say they aren't creatives because they lost sight of all of that. And it's interesting because all of those people, when you got a creator who ends up making money or like doing entrepreneurship or something like that, and they start making money, the people who are still creative but they lost sight of it, they have a tendency of being like calling the other person lucky. It's like, I wish I was born creative. And it's like, if you liked painting or you like drawing or you did something, you like building things, for instance, when you were a kid, if you would have stuck with something like that, you probably would have. You probably wouldn't be calling that person lucky. But people, I always say too, is like everything always comes back down to the internal and the external. And all growing up, you're taught to like focus more on the external things in every like facet of life. And at some point, that catches up with you, and then you become an adult who doesn't know themselves.
Yeah, and like, how would you teach a kid growing up how to know themselves better?
I would say honestly, you'd have to teach the parents to allow them their kids to know themselves better, and to not or to actually get them teachers who can actually read where they are actually like passionate towards. So it's like if you got somebody who loves art, or if you got somebody who loves math, or just can't get over science, it's like you should probably let them follow that passion a little bit. It's like the kid who always loved football, but his dad forced him to play basketball because his dad wanted to make it to the NBA one day and he didn't do it. So now it's on his kid to pursue his dreams. And I feel like that's what happens a lot of the times. Or outside of that, you don't have a parent forcing you, but you have a parent leaving you at school and aftercare all day, and you've got a bunch of teachers who don't, a lot of the times, don't really like care about what you're doing because it's a one size fits all, like you mentioned earlier. It's less about teaching the kids because the kids are the curious ones and the kids know what they like, and it's the parents and the teachers who tell them don't like that. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've seen some things about this, and yeah, one of the main things was to let the kid have as much experience as possible with different things, so different classes, different experiences with art, with sports, with that kind of stuff. So then the kid will kind of decide that I love this. I want to do more of this. I can't get enough of this, like you were saying. And then you just let them lean into that, I
Yeah,
guess.
it's interesting. You gotta like have some grounding for them, and actually give them a little bit of direction. But I would say direction to follow their interests. Because it's like if you have a kid who's really good at something or really loves something, and you don't take that away from them, that kid could be the best in the world at that one day if you allowed him to.
Yeah, unfortunately, many times they're not allowed to
Yeah.
do their purpose. And man, what is your definition of success? What is success for you nowadays and moving forward? If you could think 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what do you think would be something that you could call successful for you?
Um, I would say my definition of success is probably just freedom overall, but the freedom to actually do what I find fulfilling. And what I find fulfilling right now, and those things can change. Like, I wrote this down the other day, and I was like, a fulfilling life, in my opinion, I feel like right now would be to have enough money to where I don't have to like worry about my bank account, to just write, read, and travel and paint and have a family and help people along the way too with like my experiences and my stories and my whatever I end up building and putting out into the world. But I would love to I would love to be in a position where I could like have a family who's a wealthy family and be able to travel a lot and just do things that I find
Yeah.
peaceful and do things that my family finds peaceful.
And what would peaceful be for you?
Peaceful for me, peaceful for me in the near future, like probably in the next near future, probably for like the next foreseeable future of my life, I want to. A goal of mine is to see like every country in the world. So a big thing for me would be like traveling. It's like enough money to pay for plane tickets and all of that, and just go travel, do work for my computer, build things, help people throughout my coaching and my courses and stuff that I end up creating. Uh, making a difference in the world and in people's lives as as they as I interact with them. And above all, it's personally it would just be what I said: writing, painting, traveling, and a family at some point. That's like what I see fulfilling personally. It's like no drama, just what I got going on, the creative things that bring me peace, and studying culture.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. And I think you're in a good place to attain those goals in in the near future to start attaining them.
Thing.
You're ready. Yeah, man, if you look back 1 year ago and how much you've changed, how much you've grown, I'm sure that 1 year from now you'll have another great leap and
Yeah,
you'll be in a good place for
I
sure, man.
appreciate that. That's something that helps keep me self-inspired too. Is just like if I, as long as I keep up, because I'm only getting smarter and I'm only building better systems and upgrading my systems to be even better every day. So it's like to look at myself last January, last February, to where I'm at this January and this February. But now I actually know what to do, and I'm in a actually in the direction of where I should go. It makes me just excited and intrigued to see where I'll be at January of 2025 because it's I want that to be. I feel like that's the point. Is it's like always be better than you were last year. Like to be able to look at yourself a year ago and be like, oh, I've improved. I've gotten this percent better. Like I made this dream happen. Uh, I've got a new vision that I'm looking to attain. I feel like it's just that's what it is.
Yeah, man, I think that's what we need to strive for, to be a bit better every day and little by little, big things start happening, like the ball starts
Yeah,
rolling.
you build momentum.
Yeah, definitely. And with so much excitement, you don't even need to eat anymore.
Yeah, I didn't even need to eat before I had the excitement.
So, man, Judson, this has been great so far. Do you have anything else you'd like to add? Any more questions you'd like to ask? The floor is yours, man.
Um, Not really any questions. I would say as like I would say as like a final thing just to add though of like things that I've taken. It's to keep in mind how it's to write, journal,
and like find yourself in life, because it's like the faster everybody has so many thoughts going on in their mind every day, that if you don't take the time to actually write down the important ones and like figure out what your meaning is and find out what your vision is, then it's just going to be lost with like 36,000 other thoughts that you think in the day, and you'll never be able to move forward. And I made a post about it earlier, and that's why it's kind of on my mind to say it. But just remember that the more you can write things down and break them down, the more simpler they become and they look. And when they look attainable and they look malleable, they actually become that because you think it and you believe it. And the more that you can just reverse engineer your goals and get clear with yourself and take action, your life can just change in a year.
Yeah, so basically journal away until you get
Yeah,
clarity.
pretty much. Ask yourself hard questions. Find out what your favorite color is, like I mentioned earlier. Ask yourself what your values are. Just things that you should know about yourself, you know? You'll start wanting to ask yourself more, and you might actually end up liking it.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's what the old guys always said, know
Yeah.
yourself.
Know thyself.
So, Judson, thank you so
Thanks for having me.
much for coming. Yeah, man, it was a pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, Judson Yant for you brought us a lot of value, told us his story, told us of his struggles, told us of how he came back from them. And dude, this man is awesome. Go follow him,
I
please.
appreciate it, brother.